Um, Welcome to guests, welcome to staff, welcome to chapter members and officers. We've got a mix here, but a preponderance of chapter members. I'm glad of that. So the very first thing we're going to do is Rocky is going to share a prayer and give us an introduction to the presentation on our listening sessions. So take it away, Rocky.
Thank you. Please join me in a prayer that was written by Tom Wilson for one of the first listening sessions that we had at the beginning of this kind of ministry expansion exploration. Generous God, we give you thanks and praise. All our treasure is a gift from you. As we count our many blessings, soften our hearts, deepen our hearts, widen our hearts as we make space for your Spirit to make all things new. We pray this in the name of your Son, the gracious giver of abundant life. Amen. So tonight, our consultants, Mika Vandersall and Aaron Weber Johnson, will share the listening sessions report. And this really is kind of the end point of the first phase of our exploration as a congregation on how our physical location, our buildings and campus, can best reflect and support our vision for ministry as a congregation. With the sale of the Olive Street property, I believe we are at, and the subsequent construction, I believe we are at the perfect moment to dream and also to plan. Yes, this work may lead us to decide to launch a capital campaign to underwrite the cost of the physical changes and renovations that we're beginning to frame out through this process. Most importantly, in my opinion, this process has led us to think about our ministries, our community, and our future in this place in a fresh, honest, and new way. Just a little bit about the mechanics of tonight. After Mika's and Aaron's presentation, we'll have time for questions and reflections. But also, if you think of something and as they're talking about it and you want to ask a question in the chat, please feel free to do that. That may help us be a little more efficient from a time standpoint. I do hope everyone had a chance to look at the report. If you need more time to think about it and potentially to comment on it, Mika and Aaron will be back with their thoughts on the process at a congregational Zoom meeting that's Tuesday, July 13th at 6. They'll make a presentation, then they'll share some reflections, and then we'll break out into small groups to.
Something happened, Rocky, to your audio.
Oh.
You're back.
Oh.
You're back.
Oh, okay. When did you lose
small groups?
Oh,
last I heard.
Take the small groups and then come back and kind of share out from those groups. In addition, this conversation is also being recorded if you want to go back and listen again and think it through. To Mika and Aaron, I just want to express my personal appreciation for your time, your insights, experience, and perspectives that you shared with us through this part of the journey. It's not just about church capital campaigns, though you have considerable expertise in that space. But I think more significantly, it's again about the importance of vision, vision grounded in generosity, stewardship, and love. So with that, I think, Aaron, you're going to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Rocky, and thank you for that beautiful introduction and for reminding us of the why of the work. So we'd also like to thank you, Rocky, for guiding us along the way. You have certainly been a terrific leader. As we move forward, I made note of this earlier to Penny and Rocky, but as Mika is bringing the report up for us to walk through together, I do want to begin with a word of gratitude for this congregation specifically. Mika and I have worked with a lot of different congregations, but what we have experienced with yours is distinctive. All of the responses that we received were done courteously, generously, with kindness, and that is distinctive. And so it's something that I want to make sure you all hear, is that it's very clear to us that you all care for one another deeply, and that translates into the data itself. So as we think about this report, Rocky was spot on when she talked about how this is the ending of the listening phase. So essentially, a capital campaign process, which this may be leading to, comprises of 3 different phases. The listening phase, where during this phase, we wanted to hear everyone's input on potential projects, additional ideas, as well as how this connects to your core values and the mission and life of your congregation. And so we set about doing that in a very purposeful way. As you all know, we conducted numerous listening groups with you all. We had a great group of facilitators who each one led the group. So that allowed Mika and I to take notes, which is a significant resource for us. So we were able to attend, I believe, 14 cohort groups or small groups. In addition to that, then there was a listening survey to which we had a significant response. All of these now have been tabulated for you, and we'll walk through them momentarily. After this week, as was noted, there will be a meeting next week. And then there will be a time where we will be working, well, we will be done for the moment, but you all will be working together. There are some wonderful questions and plans to be made. There's also, of course, the transition of Jeff and thinking through what that position will look like in the future. Once that is solidified at some point, then there is the possibility for a feasibility study where these ideas that will potentially be costed out will have a chance to once again be brought to the congregation. And this, the feasibility study, is where you'll have a chance to determine what is the level of financial support for each of the projects. What are people at that stage of the game willing to give towards that effort? And so I want to delineate between the two, as this was purely a listening exercise for the projects. And then in the future, sometime, there will be a chance then to provide you with clear quantitative and statistical data around what could potentially be raised in a capital campaign. And with that, I'd like to turn your attention to Mika, who will begin walking us through the projects.
Unmute yourself, Mika. Hello. It's wonderful to see you all, many faces that I remember seeing in the listening groups. So it's good to see friendly faces here. You all are able to see the screen that I shared. I'm hoping you'll let me know if not. Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. Thumbs ups. Thumbs up. Yes. So first, we're going to talk through. We've got several projects to talk through, and I know that you all have received this report previously, but I will just walk through it briefly, and then I'll walk through each project and then turn this over to Penny, who will give a little bit of a reflection on some of the questions that were raised, and then I'll move to the next project. So the first is the Music Center. One of the things that we're looking for is alignment, perceived alignment between the congregation and the core values of the congregation, and between the project and the core values. And the Music Center, there was overwhelming support for anything to help the Music Center, and to, in particular, create a consolidated space and that this deeply connected with the core values of music and liturgy, community, and outreach, primarily with music and liturgy, although the understanding that that the Music Center is a place where community is gathered, where community is created, is real, and that there might be potentials for outreach in the Music Center as well, between the kids that come and learn to possibly connecting with other folks who come and use your services, and people who just love music and might be introduced to the cathedral through the process there. So there was overwhelming support, as we've said, and there were several questions, however, that should be addressed, and some that have been already. One is around ventilation and COVID safety, and this was seen also throughout the rest of our report and the other projects as well. The next piece is thinking about, will the new Music Center be kept secure from the Outreach Center? And I think that's really a question of where physically is that in the building and what will that look like? And then also not putting the Altar Guild, Vergers, and Acolytes in one lump with the Music Center, but to consider them separate entities in where they are housed and where they are lodged. There are several quotes that support our findings in the report that you all have received and that are here as well. But Penny, might you address these top line questions that were presented to us?
Yes, the ventilation and COVID safety, we are very aware of. Our regathering task force has that top of mind, and Martin Green has become our expert and is keeping abreast of all the latest research. And he's extremely concerned that we have good ventilation. So we are aware of that, and we are going to do everything we possibly can to keep people as safe as we can. The second one, the new Music Center be kept secure from the Outreach Center. For those of you who are, I think maybe most of you are familiar with the campus, if you start in the Queen's Courtyard and go through the double doors that go down the ramp in the middle of the building, straight ahead. If you go right, you go into the cathedral building itself and down the stairs, the back stairs, if you like, to the area where the Outreach Center will be. If, on the other hand, you go down that ramp and you turn left and go into the Great Hall building, that's where the Music Center will be. So they are geographically quite distant. And there's been a high priority placed all along, particularly on having the Outreach Center be secure from the rest of the campus. So I'm pretty confident about that particular question, and security is, again, high priority throughout the campus. This third question, the Altar Guild, Vergers, and Acolytes. The Altar Guild nothing changes for the Altar Guild. The sacristy is still the sacristy. My hope, my plan is that the Vergers and Acolytes will have space for stowing their stuff and for vesting where the choir room is now. That's the closest space we have to the church. It's inevitably, it's up some stairs because there just aren't any other spaces that are on the same level. But that keeps it close to the church and is a useful space in that way. Is that it? I think those are the main questions that came up.
Yeah, I think those are the main ones for the Music Center. Thanks, Penny. Furnishing 525 Olive Street. There is general alignment with the core values of community and outreach for the furnishing of the new building. There is value on having the staff, providing the staff with space where they can work effectively, and where they feel good about the space that they're in, that it be a beautiful space. Also, Olive Street, the 525 Olive Street, it's important that that space be a place where people can gather, and that could be used in understandings of outreach to the wider community. There were several questions around the furnishing of 525 Olive Street, around what was and what wasn't covered in the sale. Will they be used furniture? Will it be new furniture? how does this connect with the developers, so on and so forth. There's been an update, and I'll just turn it over to Penny right now for this update, which will take care of a lot of these questions.
I hope so. Well, what was and wasn't covered in the sale of the building, that could turn into an all evening
Sure.
conversation. We sold the land. We have money in the bank. We have a tenant improvement allowance that the buyers have allowed us that will cover some of the finishing of our space. We will be paying HOA fees that have a permanent ceiling on them. I think I'm going to stop there with that first question. There is a plan in place. I think there was some confusion around this question from the looks of things. We do have a plan. The question was really around funding it and what people felt was worthy of the building. The plan includes both the space and the furnishings. Kathleen has been working with our architects and it gets great kudos because she has managed to get us some fantastic bargains. We are close to ordering new furniture, both for the offices, for the meeting spaces, and appliances such as dishwashers, because we have 2 kitchens. So it's all underway. It's new. It's name brands. Was it Herman Miller? Was that what you said? Yes, Kathleen's nodding. And she's managed to do it for far less than the LLC had anticipated budgeting. The reason this came into this project was the hope that we can preserve as much of the capital from the sale as we possibly can so that it continues to generate income forever and support our operating budget. It became evident that we were going to have to wait on the fundraising part of this. So we had to go ahead with the furniture plan. The LLC is ordering and buying the furniture and the appliances. It will look gorgeous. We will be very proud of it. It will, as I said, meeting spaces, community meeting spaces, and internal cathedral meeting spaces. And sometime in the early part of next year, once we are in the building and we furnished it, Kathleen has offered to throw a wonderful party for us where we will get to do a housewarming, a house blessing, and people will be offered the opportunity to bid to have their name on a plaque in a room or two in return for sponsoring a room or a chair or a set of tables or a dishwasher if that's your fancy. So that's our plan. It would be a one-time freestanding fundraiser, which I have to say this is still potential because chapter hasn't yet approved it. But that's our plan and our hope, and that we can do that as a one-time thing and at least regain some of the capital, if not all of it, so that we are well positioned for the future. We have done a great deal of research on identifying the needs of the community for meeting spaces, and our revenue research, task force, yes, RRTF, Revenue Research Task Force of marketing and event professionals within the congregation has been busy drawing up a detailed marketing plan for what we will rent the spaces for, whether we'll give nonprofits a break, AA, etc. So that's all underway in the planning stages. There will be meeting areas just for cathedral activities. The second floor will be our cathedral offices and a couple of meeting rooms as well.
Great, thank you. Now the Outreach Center. There was general alignment with the concept of an outreach center and the core values of outreach and community, but there were several questions. This by far was the most controversial, not in the understanding that that it is an important thing and that your ministry with particularly vulnerable people is not important, but the questions around how, why, what exactly will happen in the outreach center, plan for long-term sustainability, connecting with staffing. These were questions that were floating around pretty consistently, both in the surveys and in the listening groups. So there's a pretty long list of questions, many of them easily answerable, and some of them a bit more challenging. Rocky and others have also been in conversation, along with Penny and others, around potential partners in the Outreach Center, and really investigating what the needs are, and so on and so forth. So those are in process. But Penny, would you like to talk a little bit more about some of these questions that are easily answerable, knowing that others are still in process?
Yeah, a lot of this is still in process. Developing the relationships with community partners and neighbors, for instance, and which includes the city staff. I cannot tell you what exactly the city government is doing, but they are very supportive of our plan. We've asked city government and other agencies that work with our unsheltered friends, if we create this center, is it useful? Is it superfluous? Is it going to be overtaken by events? And the answer we got back was it's needed, especially right there where you are on the edge of the park. And it will help to support what all the other agencies and the city are doing. We are concerned not to replicate services. There will be a space where people can sleep. I anticipate that will be used occasionally. There's our interfaith shelter network. We usually do a couple of weeks a year of participating in that ministry, and people sleep there under supervision for 2 weeks. We will be able to host mission trips from other places, and have somewhere for instance, a youth group to sleep. In the past, we've opened the Great Hall or the old Guild Room on nights when it was in the winter, when it was particularly bad weather. We'll be able to offer that on an emergency basis. We are still working on a plan for long-term sustainability and on how we will keep this going. And that's part of the partnership conversation, is can we tap into the staff from other agencies and have them use our space. Do you want to go to the next page? I thought it was a really acute question about, is this just about making the cathedral community feel good about their efforts? There is always that danger that we do outreach for our own jollies, to feel good about what we're doing. But we feel that this is really needed. We are supporting, we are providing help for the symptoms of homelessness, but we hope that our community will also work towards structural change. But what we see is that there's going to be a continuing need for on the spot help for people who are currently unsheltered. I mentioned the security question earlier. We are very much aware of that. Kathleen actually is working on a grant. You know that we got our great security camera system thanks to a grant from Homeland Security, and there's another grant that's available, and so she's working on applying for that grant to expand our security equipment. Yes, the center will be ADA compliant. There is a lift in the plan. What is the agreement with Greystar? Good question. The agreement is that we are not allowed to do outreach with unsheltered people in the shared space, which is the large courtyard. But the space immediately outside the chapel that used to be called the clergy parking lot is entirely our space. And we can continue to use that for any ministry we wish. But it was one of the reasons that I focused on that part of the campus for the outreach center, because there's an entrance from Nutmeg Street. So we can be as undisruptive as possible for our neighbors. But I'm hoping that we will have tenants in that building of good heart and good spirit who will see what we're doing and want to join in and help.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And we haven't spoken with the neighbors who will be in that building yet, because we don't know who they are yet.
Thank you. And now there are several other small projects in quotation marks because many folks did not see these necessarily as small projects. And they all received, generally speaking, these received support, in particular for the commercial kitchen and what that might be used for. And also the third floor, the transition of the third floor was seen as very important, especially for a bathroom on the third floor. And what might happen on the third floor that really could connect with the core values of the cathedral with Safe Church Protocol to provide as even safer space for youth and families. There were a few comments about the AV and what might be possible there, any kind of assisting and making that even more effective. And security was a concern, again, woven through all of the listening groups and survey with the smaller projects. But Penny's already addressed that, that's woven into all of the plans. So there are several particular questions to consider, 4 here and just a few more. And back to Penny we go. Although I feel like I can almost answer these myself at this point with how much we've talked about them. But Penny, off to you.
Plans for cleaning and maintenance of the space. I'm not sure which space the question was directed at, but we plan to continue to clean and maintain the space on our campus as we always have done, with a combination of the sextons and a cleaning service. We have a wonderful new cleaning service they come in regularly. The plans for the kitchen rental will come under the Revenue Research Task Force umbrella when the time comes. Yes, there will be 2 kitchens in the 525 Olive Building. I would say that neither of them really counts as a commercial or a pantry. One is a little smaller than the one we have now. It'll be off the guild room and available for events. And then one will be in the staff office area. That'll be a lot smaller, more like our old break room area. The clergy parking lot is, but there are all kinds of ideas about this, and I'm excited about it, but I think it's going to be a multi-purpose. It's going to be as flexible as we can make it, since it is our one piece of our own space, outdoor space on the 6th Avenue side. I anticipate it being a space that can be used for gathering at showers of blessing, for small funeral receptions, for youth group picnics. I know that there are ideas about putting solar panels up high over it, like a, what do I call it? A shelter kind of thing that would capture the sun. We're looking into that. So those are some of the ideas.
Great. And just a few more.
Oh, more. Oh yes, there are handicapped spaces. I think that's not optional. That's a given. In the underground parking under the new space, there will be, of course, the appropriate number of handicapped spaces. What will the repurposed vacant space? Okay, so it'll be used for the music center, the outreach center.
Then there are several other spaces that once those all moved around would need to be repurposed.
Mm-hmm. The choir room will become the acolyte and verger room. Right. I think that covers the main spaces that will become vacant. And the archives, we're not getting rid of the archive space underneath the cathedral, but we are having a purpose-built, purpose-designed archive space in the new building with special sprinkler and flood protection.
Great. And then finally, additional projects. There were many ideas, some of which have been considered and some of which haven't, some like ADA accessibility throughout the space. Yes, people, that's already a part of this. So I will just leave these up for a minute for you all to read through. Some of them, as I said, have already been considered. The solar panels when you're thinking about the clergy parking lot, and you can read them all further, but they are being considered as you're putting your plans together. So I got Let's go on and on. Yep. So that's what we have tonight as far as the projects go. And then we have just a few recommendations in moving forward, mostly around communication. And then we'll move to questions. Back to you, Erin.
Yes, it is. Hello. Okay, so recommendations. The first of these would be to publicize the results of this report in broader statements, which you are doing so by recording this already.
Yeah.
So you're already seeing to number one. Well done. And then we'll have a chance to talk with the congregation next week as well. As we do, we will of course be clear about the role and goals of the listening phase and how this differs in scope with the feasibility study. Two, you've already started to do this as well. You heard Penny talking about this, but further explore partnerships with organizations that can work with you and or use space in the Outreach Center. When you arrive at a feasibility study, you'll need to publicize the list of organizations with whom you spoke about space use and partnerships. Three, create a list after the partnership conversations with whom you might be helped, who might be helped by renting the space or providing referrals for renter. 4, explain and publicize in detail the relationship with Greystar. What are they and what aren't they providing? What stipulations are in place? The more clarity around that, the greater ease there will be around what you are proposing with these plans. 5, communicate the work of the Revenue Task Force, who has been doing tremendous work. Explain how this work intersects with the potential capital campaign with regard to potential renters. And finally, communicate with worship leaders, which we've already started to do tonight, about the plan for storage and meeting in this space. So there are a number of different components here that you'll see are all around communication, which you'll have a chance to do in the months ahead as you are in the midst of a clergy transition. So with these recommendations in mind, we wanted to open this up to all of you. We have some time to walk through questions or even reflections together. And we'd love to have a chance to open not just up to the chapter, but if there are congregation members that have joined us as well, open that up to you all.
I see Justin's hand.
Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, good evening. Thanks again for the presentation. That was very helpful to see it out there. I saw one thing that was, or didn't see one thing that did come up in some of our conversations, which was, or maybe just one of our conversations, which was the endowed curacy idea that I know in one of the meetings that we had with both Mika and Aaron. And I wasn't sure if that just didn't get traction, but I think that it's one of those things that when we hear other types of ideas and see them on the table, then everyone can go and say like, oh, I hadn't thought that might be a need. What can I learn more about it? So how do we kind of address other ideas that didn't make the PowerPoint?
I can say, Justin, that these were really capital thoughts that were put into this, and that the endowed curacy came up in one conversation and one conversation only. So that was, there were very few of those things that didn't have any kind of repetition in other places. And so that's why we didn't put that in particular in the report. And I know Penny has more possibly to say about this as well.
It's an interesting question because it would require a capital effort to get it started, but then it's an ongoing operating cost. So it's sort of a hybrid thing, but I'm intrigued by it.
Well, my only, sort of position on it is that I think that it's one of those things that if we don't list it as an idea or a priority or something that would be important to us or could be important to us, and we can't even into the logistics of whether or not we can afford it. Because, we have, random donors for lots of different things that people speak to people individually. And if we kind of put that out there as an idea, oh, that is something that might be important or more important than X or Y or Z. And I think that I wouldn't want us to limit the idea to just the soundbite of a curacy endowment. You know, if it was any type of ongoing fund or money that would support that effort, it doesn't have to be a full salary, it doesn't have to be something, it could be a stipend, it could be, you know, an airplane ticket, you know, something that sort of says this is an important value for us. This is something that we think that would increase and improve our worship and improve our outreach and improve our visibility. Then it's saying, it's putting a stamp on it saying, this is a priority that we would like our congregation to then explore or see or understand. And people could ask questions about it, like, oh, what is that? What would that mean? What would that look like? And it's able to generate conversation just by being present. And it might even go the other way. It's like, oh, that's not something that's important to us. We'd rather have X, Y, or Z. But I think having it out there, for me as a member of chapter, would be important so that people could then, more people could see it and then amplify that idea or just the conversation around it.
So I think there's a bigger question behind that, which is, there are probably a number of things that only came up once. And is that something that you've captured, or do we need to go back to all the listening and listen to the listening session recordings to pull them out?
I went back in preparation for this report. I went through all of the listening sessions and only included capital expenses. So the personnel thought that came up there was only in that particular. That was the one that was that the stewardship one, Justin?
Probably.
I believe so. So Jeff invited further ideas around really thinking broadly around personnel during that time, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so that's what got us down that road. That question wasn't really asked in any other listening session. So that's why I didn't put them in there. I can go back to that listening session and add it if you'd like.
I'm just wondering if there are other things in similar.
No, there really aren't. There really aren't.
I would like to just agree with Justin. I would like to see that in the final report as well.
Okay.
Darian, did you have your hand up?
I did. Am I muted? No.
No, we can hear you. You're muted now.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Is there any kind of a spreadsheet that outlines the revenue, all the various revenue sources, not just rental space, but individual donors or corporate donors or grants? Have we prepared some kind of spreadsheet that lists all the potential sources of revenue and how much what's the goal for each one of those sources of revenue? I'm on as Kathleen knows, I'm on the rental space committee, and I hear a lot of reference to income revenue from rental space, and I'm kind of gulping and I'm saying, how much do we all expect the revenue committee or revenue from rental to generate? What percentage are we expecting that rental space is going to generate towards whatever the amount of money is that we're going to ultimately want to raise, which I think in itself is a question mark, I think right now, is it?
I think, Diane, I think we discussed this at the last chapter meeting when we had the presentation from the Revenue Research Task Force, and there was a projection prepared, which we can get to you, for the next 3-4 years of what we hope the rental space will generate.
But is there projection for various sources of revenue?
We can put those together.
We get that with our income and expense financial statements. All incoming comes in, all outgoing goes out, and we have a snapshot and a deep down view of that as well that Erin prepares for us each month. So.
And then I think what Darian is asking for is a projection of all of those things.
Right. When Erin does those projected budgets, that's what she works with.
Well, I don't mean the overall church budget. I'm meaning just for this one project.
Well, this project is doesn't have a budget yet.
So the next phase, the sort of when we move forward, if we choose to move forward, the next phase in feasibility is really where we will have those much more specific kinds of conversation about who can give how much, and really flesh that out, because that would be the basis for deciding whether to move forward with an actual capital campaign. So we're in a listening phase and an information gathering and dreaming and ideal phase. We are not as pragmatic as you are yet, but that pragmatism comes into play in the feasibility phase, where yes, we're going to look at what are our sources for supporting this supposed capital project to support our expansion of ministry. Where are they specifically? What do people think they will give? And then that would be the basis for a decision to go or not go with an actual campaign with real projections and numbers around this specific effort.
And a couple of other thoughts. We have a parallel project going on with the architects creating a master plan, so that we're moving towards having some idea of what all of these different things would cost. And we're not wedded to any of them or all of them. That will be part of our discernment, whether we go ahead with all pieces or just one piece or a couple, depending on what we think our resources are going to be. So we're working, it's a journey.
Do I just jump in?
Please, go ahead.
I know the revenue task force projections were not based on the capital campaign. It was towards operating expenses, A, and B, the projection was based on the most of what we've been taking in revenue-wise from rental of space in the old facility. And then we added on some very reasonable numbers as to what we thought we would get, like 1 wedding and 2 concerts and whatever. So I think it was projected at 20,000 a year. Is that right, Kathleen? So, and that was based on Erin's figures from what we've taken in the last 2 or 3 years renting space. So we very much did not put your hopes up that we were going to make millions of dollars off of space rental in the next 5 years.
Say, I wanted to just encourage everybody. These are really great questions that you're asking of this report. And I am very grateful for the tenor of this, because there are some times where we do these types of reports where people can kind of get in the weeds, but you all are engaging in this really well. I'm wondering, are there any questions about core values or about the connection with the vision that is being set forward? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think we need to, I don't know if we've fully thought through the idea of, we have like identified a set of capital needs, but I think we also have staff needs that we haven't had as thorough of a process of kind of considering what they might be. And that's at least as an important part of our ministry, executing our ministry as our building. So I think it would be helpful as we kind of go through the feasibility of thinking about, we're asking people to give quite a large sum probably to capital needs, but should we think about, is that kind of coming at the expense of giving or potential giving to having more staff to do things? I think that's one thing that the Justin's idea about the curacy kind of speaks to, but I feel like it's something that needs some consideration maybe.
Mm-hmm. I think I love the idea of having a more extensive conversation about our staffing needs and configuration.
Yeah, 'cause I think that with a lot of the capital ideas, when we're talking about bricks and mortar and spaces, those come with like real personnel that are needed to run them. You know, it's even if it's just security, because we'll have more rooms open. If it's, you know, a director in a center, if it's a reception staffing, or all these other different things, not to mention programming. You know, so you know, building these great spaces, we have to remember it's more than just, you know, paint and walls and everything else. It's what do we need to be sustainable. And we're also not talking about building any like anything that makes money. You know, we're not talking about like, oh, it's a shop that will sell stuff and then it will, you know, pay the hourly wage of the person there. I mean, outreach, we're not charging our unsheltered, you know, neighbors to come to the outreach center. So we have to make sure that there's a grant or something else in space. We can't just build the space and give someone a key. We need, you know, programming. It will need supplies. It will need internet. It will need all types of different types of things that are part of that operating ongoing expense that we have to be mindful of when we're looking at that dollar figure of what's needed to create these programs.
You know, Justin, what you've just raised was a theme that was definitely raised throughout the report, and I want to affirm that reflection. And it's actually part of the recommendations that Mika and I laid out as well, is having a comprehensive plan that names some of these pieces before we move into a feasibility study is going to be really important. So thank you for raising that.
I think too, it's not only just naming the pieces, but putting that, and I don't know who's going to do this, putting that dollar figure with each piece.
That's
so that at some point we have this comprehensive list of all the pieces. We know what it's going to cost to implement, facilitate all these pieces. And then we have to start setting priorities, I guess, based on what we think we can raise. So something that might be on the list right now that we think is ultimately important might be number one on the list. But when we look at that dollar figure, it might drop down to number 10.
Well, and I also think another piece that Justin, you hit on a little bit, but I think it's also what you're saying is that there's going to need to be some conversation about what's the level of volunteer support in addition to staff support to make sure that whatever is being planned for in terms of programming for the potential projects are also thought about in terms of feasibility.
Yeah, and I think this is a difficult part of the process as well, because you know, nothing that was on the list that's been presented so far is something that I feel we can easily write off and say, you know what, that's not part of our values. It's not of interest. Like, there's not like a, let's have an ice cream truck, you know, like, okay, no, let's not do that. I mean, everything on the list sounds great, seems to be part of our ministry, part of our core values, something that people would be proud of being a part of. So I think this next phase of, is going to make it very hard to figure out like, well, you know, which one or which two or three kind of are feasible, which, you know, how do we put our all of our eggs in those baskets as opposed to all of them. Because I mean, if it was a blank check issue, I think that everyone would say that the ideas that have been put forward so far are all great and consistent, seem to be consistent with our values and our mission, and let's just do it. But now it's the, oh, here's what we want, you know, and here's what we can afford, you know, or maybe it's here's what we want, here's what we can afford. It doesn't have to be down here, but you know.
Ultimately, it'll be chapter's job to do that prioritizing with, of course, a lot of input from the congregation.
And I want to affirm too, Penny and Rocky and a few of the folks here have also been engaged in some wonderful conversations with external partners that I'm sure will also have a large contributing voice in some of these decisions as well.
I just have a question from for Mika and Aaron, from your perspective, having done this with other congregations, that sort of where the rubber meets the road piece that we're talking about, kind of can you speak to your experience in kind of the work that congregations do to push through to get to that prioritization and to figure those things out? Is that something that as you do and you're out and you're talking to folks, does that just become or do people typically find a moment of clarity where, yes, this is what we can pay for and this aligns with our vision and values? Or is this the most difficult part, which I think Justin kind of referenced?
Erin, you or me?
Mika, you're the pro with outsider.
Well, I mean, so yes, this is a hard part. Yes. And yes, much becomes clear in conversations. Much becomes clear in a feasibility study as well. And what this listening phase has done has given you all, if you are able to articulate and communicate certain things, then we will be able to test in feasibility in a much more effective way. And often folks come to a greater sense of clarity around what is really urgent through a strategic planning process. And so that is another piece that also helps sift. You're able to sift through things through a strategic planning process and looking towards the future and how you make decisions. So I don't believe that's really on the table right now for you all. So in thinking through the core values that you have in the conversations through the feasibility study, you will be able to do greater sifting. I can say that in the external partnership conversation, that takes a tremendous amount of relationship building that you all have already engaged in and have already engaged in, I'd say, in more of a kind of individual kind of way, and are trying to bring that together in a more consistent, holistic kind of way. So that will also be helpful as well.
Yeah.
Have you or will you be doing any kind of conducting a wealth research, on both our existing and our potential donors? Will that be something you all will be doing?
That would be in a feasibility study, right? And we're not going to be doing that anytime immediately.
No.
So I guess I'm asking if Erin and Mika will be conducting that kind of a thing.
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Our contract with them ends at the end of this month.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So I'm not sure who was it that asked the question of Mika and Erin, from their experience, how do churches, are there certain tools or ways of proceeding that are generally utilized for us to get to this difficult task of prioritizing? I'm not sure I heard.
I think I asked that question.
Yeah. And I think essentially the answer is you hire good consultants.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and also it's it's a very interactive partnership in that work as well.
Other questions?
So a reflection I want to reflect back to you all is that we did not hear in the data anyone say, these are terrible ideas. I don't understand why we're talking about amplifying our vision when we should really be focused on our own people, which, let me tell you, happens a lot. So there'll be how can we take care of others when we need to take care of ourselves? I didn't hear any of that in the data. So there is definitely a lot of engagement already happening on the congregational level. And that was another place of real generosity in your narrative that I want to reflect back to you.
Erin's saying that you have good data. Just to put it another way, you know, there could be a lot more conflict that we could see in data. There could be much more disagreement on the future of your community. There's a lot of good stuff to work with here. There really is. A lot of interest, a lot of engagement. Many people filled in the survey. That is not always the case as well. And that shows a high level of engagement and commitment and faith. So there's a lot of good stuff to work with, as overwhelming as it is.
Okay, well, we'll have another opportunity a week from now to continue the conversation, and I'm sure you'll all think of other things to ask about and to think about in the intervening days. The recording, I hope, will be available by Thursday afternoon for anyone who wants to watch this and refresh their memories. Unless there are other questions or comments, I think we're going to be ahead of schedule. It's pretty exciting. And I want to thank those who are not chapter members for joining us and taking the time to be with us and engage and participate in this. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thanks, Mika and Erin.
Thank
See
you.
Tuesday.
Thank you.
Everyone.